Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Comic Source Podcast. I'm your host, Jace. This is some interviews that I conducted at San Diego Comic-Con last week, specifically the black market narrative information. Obviously, the big news for Kyle Higgins and his crew is that No One, which I have been contending for ever since it came out, is the best comic on the stands. The immersiveness of it, the fact that you have other genres like the podcast, it really makes just for a fantastic story. Now, we had the final issue last week, and it may have been a little controversial. I haven't heard a lot, but the whole idea of who is No One, and that question doesn't necessarily get answered. But at the press conference on Friday morning, what we learned from Kyle Higgins and his crew is that there's going to be a No One feature film, which I could not be more excited for. It's going to be a feature-length film, sort of a found footage, sort of documentary. So there'll be found footage, there'll be interviews. Kyle's directing. Now, Kyle has directed shorts in the past, but he's never directed a feature film. He went to school for filmmaking. I think he's a brilliant filmmaker. I think he's just a brilliant creator. So I could not be more excited for this. Now, obviously, the first thing that comes to mind is casting. Early days, guys, early days. But you'll hear in the interview I did ask Kyle about possibly casting the same voices that are in the podcast. And what Kyle mentioned was that he wants this to be immersive, and the way to do that is to have those same voices do the roles in the film. But schedules don't always line up. We'll have to wait and see all that how that all plays out. But one thing is for sure. It's going to be fantastic. No One is an action-packed series. It has been from the beginning, and a little bit of crime noir, a little bit of real life, a little bit cynical at times, and a little bit dark, but just absolutely immersive storytelling, as I said, and fantastic. Set in Pittsburgh, and one of the things that I want to point out, because you're going to see this in the film, is this idea of kind of a blue-collar city. Right? There's a lot of snow. A lot of it takes place at night. It's sort of dark and dingy. Think a little bit of Tim Burton's Gotham City, if you will, but less fantastical. So with that background and knowing what I've seen from Kyle before, where he's done some short films, I want to say it was called The Hours, but I'll have to check on that. But I trust his vision. I trust his vision that this is going to be a fantastic film. So like I mentioned, the podcast that accompanies the issues are fantastic as well. So if everything lines up and we are able to bring in, or Kyle, not us, but if Kyle and his producing partners and what have you are able to bring in the same cast that we have on the podcast, that would be amazing. Playing the role of Julia Page would be Rachel Lee Cook. Fantastic actress. Has done a fantastic job in that role, voice acting. Patton Oswalt, huge comic book fan, huge self-described nerd. He plays Teddy Barstow, who's kind of the editor, if you will, of the Pittsburgh Ledger that's tracking this No One crime spree and is producing the podcast. Then we have Todd Stashwick as Ben Kern. Ben Kern's sons are heavily involved with No One. Whether or not one of them is No One remains to be seen. But Todd is probably my favorite actor on the podcast. He brings so much gravitas and emotionality to the role. And you might think, well, it's just voice acting, but man, he really nails it. Then when it comes to the titular figure of No One, might seem sort of strange to have the voice of Robin from Batman the Animated Series, but Lauren Lester does a fantastic job as well. There's a grit. I'm sure there's stuff done in post-production to make his voice sound gravelly and what have you, but he does a fantastic job as well. I don't know that necessarily he could handle the physicality of it, but No One typically is masked, so I guess we'll have to wait and see how that all shakes out. But going back to what I said before about the snow and the dark, I'm sure they'll get a fantastic cinematographer, but I'm also sure that Kyle, who's writing along with Brian Buccellato, who were the co-writers on the comic, I'm sure he's going to make sure his input is known as the director to really get the feel of the city of Pittsburgh and the feel that he wants for this No One film. So The film's going to be called I Am No One, and Kyle's hoping that it's going to be in theaters next year. Now, we know with Hollywood that's just not always possible. Things have a way of taking longer than we would like them to, but fingers crossed. As you can see, the credits here, written by Kyle and Brian Buccellato, based on the visuals from the comic. Comic artist is Geraldo Borges. Kyle's going to be directing, and then producing you have Steven Schneider, who's done things like Insidious and all kinds of creepy horror-type films, so he definitely has the right sort of background, if you will. And then from ZQ Entertainment, Ara Kashishian, I hope I'm saying that right, Peter Jackal, Kyle, and Brian also producing. So I'm going to go ahead and play the interviews for you now. Now, one thing that you should keep in mind is we didn't just talk about the big news of the film. So I got a chance to talk to the entire Massiveverse creative team, or those that were there at San Diego Comic-Con. So talked to Melissa Flores about The Dead Lucky, talked to Ryan Parrott about Rogue Sun, and talked to Kyle and Brian a little bit, not only about No One, but also a little bit about Radiant Black, which is winding up the Catalyst War right now. So I'm going to put them all together in one. I cannot recommend these books enough. Whether it's No One, a bit more realistic, whether it's Radiant Black and the other members of the Massiveverse, Radiant Pink, Radiant Yellow, Radiant Red, Rogue Sun, Dead Lucky, they're all fantastic stories. The creators have such a passion for these books, and you can tell that they're having fun making them, which means we get to have fun in reading them. So appreciate everybody joining, as always. Hope you enjoy the interviews, and we'll talk to you next time.
To the hypocrites and the corrupt, the swindlers, the parasites, all those who take from their fellow man, this message is for you. For too long, this country has been choked by corruption and injustice. The vulnerable have been oppressed by the rich and powerful, who abuse the laws for personal gain at the expense of everyone under them. In the summer of 2022, I embarked on my mission to expose them, to hold them accountable, to bring change. You may think you know what happened next, but you have been deceived. You have been told that I am responsible for murder, that new laws could protect you, that I am dead. You have been told many things, except the truth. Until now. What follows is a video record, so that you no longer have to rely on what you are told. No one escapes justice, not even me. I am no one, and this is my story.
Jace coming to you live again from San Diego Comic-Con, one of my favorite people, not just my favorite creators. Kyle Higgins joining us. You've got big news.
I do.
And I want you to tell them.
Tell them?
I love it. I told you this yesterday. I love it when good things happen to good people. So I'm so excited for you.
Thank you. So I guess the big news today, our true crime superhero series in the Massiveverse, No One, has been going for the last about a year and a half now. It's 10 issues. But each issue also includes an in-universe scripted podcast that we've done with Rachel Lee Cook, Patton Oswalt, Todd Stashwick, Yuri Lowenthal, Tara Platt, Lauren Lester. Like, it's just a murderer's row of acting talent, all voicing characters from the book, as the podcast, again, exists in universe with it all. Well, we are taking that level of immersion one step further with the announcement today of our brand new true crime superhero film called I Am No One. It's in a documentary format, and it is both an adaptation of the comic and the podcast, as well as a continuation of the story. So the movie itself is also in universe with the comic and the podcast. And so, again, the story, in addition to all of our, cool, in-universe newspaper articles and Unreal Engine videos and websites and all of the doxing material, all of that is like this as one big kind of, multi-narrative experience.
Yeah, and it's what's so brilliant. I mean, this is the #1 book I recommend to everybody, especially people that don't read comics.
like just listen to the first episode of the podcast and then go back, read the first issue, and then you're just sucked in.
Yeah.
So logical first step, but that doesn't mean that or next step, but that doesn't mean you're going to be able to do it. So it's got to be rewarding to know this is going to come to the big screen.
Absolutely. And like, we have amazing partners on this. Like, this has been the plan from day one. Brian and I have spent 3 years building all of this, and our partners, our producing partners on the Who Is No One audio series, ZQ Entertainment, they're doing the film with us. Peter Jackal and Ara Kershishian. I'm sorry, Ara, if I just butchered your last name. Steven Schneider is also joining us, producing. Steven is the producer behind some little movies called Paranormal Activity, Insidious, Late Night with the Devil, Blair Witch. So Brian and I are producing with them. Brian and I are also writing the movie, and I'm directing the film. So it's something that is, as you can probably tell, it's been a lot of work behind the scenes for a long time. But we've also built this thing. I mean, we have like a 90-page Bible that Brian and I have been working on. We worked on for 2 years before the book even started coming out. So it's something that's like a crazy ambitious swing. We fell a little behind schedule during the release cycle, but I think once the trade paperback comes out in November, collecting all 10 issues and the back matter and all 10 episodes, I think you'll see like the way it really does link up like this is hopefully going to be worth the wait.
Now, I know it's probably a little too early to talk about casting.
Yeah.
But when I had Todd Stashwick on, I talked about just how phenomenal everybody is on the cast, bringing so much emotion, and it's so additive. In a perfect world, you bring a lot of those people in, right? Just depending on their schedules and what have you.
Absolutely. Like, as you said, it is too early to talk about cast. But what I can say is, like, anyone who has heard me talk about this universe before, or even just everything I just rattled off about the project, probably knows I love immersion. And so it's definitely our intention for as many people from the podcast as possible to come back and play these characters for the film to keep that level of immersion like that. But as you said, it's a little too early. That said, we also have some new additions to the film based on the structure, and there will be some really, really exciting casting announcements tied to those new characters as well. Which, we'll get into in the future. Your best bet is to, here's my plug, subscribe to the Black Market Narrative newsletter. You can go to blackmarket.la and sign up for it there. That's where you'll hear all about any, new updates, behind the scenes stuff, maybe some casting announcements. We've also got some really fun casting announcements for the Radiant Black audiobook that we're announcing at the panel today. The audiobook that we announced at C2E2 in April. With Will Friedle and Ryder Strong from Boy Meets World, Batman Beyond, and the secret animated Radiant Black short film from issue 15. They are playing Nathan and Marshall in the audiobook. But do you want to hear who else we're adding?
Yeah, let's do it.
So Mr. and Mrs. Burnett, Nathan Burnett's parents, Ryder Strong's character's parents. We have our favorite mom of a generation. We have Kim Rhodes from Sweet Life of Zack and Cody and Supernatural playing Mrs. Burnett. Playing Mr. Burnett, we have from Batman the Animated Series and Who Is No One, Lauren Lester voicing Mr. Burnett. We also have playing 001, our big cosmic smuggler, who the Radiance and the technology all come from originally, the bad guy technology. We have from Star Trek Picard, and from Star Trek Picard, from No One, and from a killer Kickstarter going on right now. I think Jace Frogcore, Mr. Todd Stashwick, from Star Trek Strange New Worlds, playing Radiant Pink, Eva Reyes. We have Melissa Navia. If you like Jujutsu Kaisen, you're going to like our casting for Radiant Red, Satomi Son, that's Ann Gatko. And with too many credits to name, but I'll give you one, The Last of Us, playing our bad boy anti-hero of the Massiveverse Shift, Mr. Troy Baker.
Oh, nice. Yeah, he is fantastic. And I want to talk a little bit more about Radiant Black and the Catalyst War, but one more thing about No One. So I'm sure No One fans are out there. Issue 10 dropped this week. They're like, but it wasn't an ending. We didn't find out who No One. I was talking to Brian about it, and he made such a great point, and it clicked something in my head for me. And I was like, yeah, the perfect ending. Life is not answers. Life is not all tied up in a nice neat. So that's really what you guys are going for.
Yeah, I mean, we're playing. I really pride myself in trying to play to the strengths of both the medium, but also the genre that we're exploring. And I think in the kind of true crime nature of it all, it's pretty rare to get the type of closure that you would think from a big Hollywood film or a standard comic book ending. We do give an answer of who no one is. It's just that answer is probably not true.
Right.
And everyone in the book and the series knows it, just like everyone experiencing the book and the podcast also feels that in their core. And I got to tell you, that's the point. The story that the film is going to pick up with in the aftermath of this, in the months since the events depicted in issue 10 and episode 10 have wrapped up, what the world has become as a result of that answer is kind of at the core of the movie. So this is all by design, and I can tell you, I promise you, you will get an answer, or maybe you won't, in the film I Am No One, hopefully coming next year. I shouldn't say hopefully, that's our plan, for it to be next year. It's also a film that actually takes you behind the scenes of the No One operation itself. Anyone who's read the book might remember in issue 2, he was found in a parking garage planting a GoPro camera. There's all sorts of footage out there that operation has collected, both behind the scenes as well as in world of what they were doing. And I say operation because we don't actually know what that really entailed. The tag at the end of the podcast says operation, and I'm just going to leave it at that for now.
Fair enough. Well, we mentioned Radiant Black, the audiobook that's coming, again, so additive to the story. The Catalyst War going on, and the 0.5 issues. Has it been a little more work doing those than you thought?
Been a massive amount of work. We've gotten a bit behind on some of our books, but that's actually something that we've been able to rectify going forward as well. And that's the thing, it's a small little team of us doing all of this, and we want to take these crazy ambitious swings. Sometimes life comes up as well, across the creative team on Radiant Black, for example. I'm also, I don't even know if you can see this on camera, I have a massive knee brace on. I just had my 6th knee surgery in 6 years, another cartilage transplant, so it's dealing with some of that stuff on top of the huge workload of what we're doing, plus Moon Man with Kid Cudi, everything else, we fell a little behind on stuff, and it's, like you said, it's a massive amount of work. But one of the things that we're doing as we're wrapping up the Catalyst War right now is that the main Radiant Black is going to go on pause until February of next year. We're going to be able to come back with multiple issues banked. We're still making it behind the scenes this whole time so that we won't have these kind of delays again. We're also going to be publishing 1 book a month going forward instead of 2.
Yeah.
So that definitely is going to help things.
Right.
But I'm really, really excited to have gotten through all this stuff. And at the end of the day, I'm incredibly proud of everyone in all of the books. And so to be able to get through it is it's been not only such a feat, but for them to all be at the level of quality that that we've been able to maintain them at is something that's really, really special.
Well, I think that's something us as fans kind of understood. I mean, you generated just fantastic books and a lot of goodwill because they were so good. So even though, I knew it's man, 2 books a month, I'm fine. And the story's so awesome that I'm willing to wait because I know you don't want to compromise on quality. You probably could have got stuff out quicker, but you want to be sure it's up
we want
to
to
the level.
We want to do it right, and it's a fine line. You have to be on stands consistently and on time. And, that's, like I said, that's something we're working towards now. And, heading into next year, the plan is it's Radiant Black and Rogue Sun monthly. Infernal Girl Red Book 2 is going to drop in there. We'll serialize it like we did Book 1 in the direct market as well. But then outside of that, our real plan is to, take swings in other, how do I want to put this? We want to really focus on working on things that help us raise general awareness of the universe. So the Radiant Black audiobook's a great example where it's a different medium. It's something I love as a director and a voice director to be able to dive in and build out, but it's also something that hopefully can help draw people who have never heard of the Massiverse into our narrative web. And as we have found that as people have found the books, they have really found them, and they just continue to read more and more things in the universe, despite everything being designed to not require you to read anything else, So that's incredibly fulfilling for me. And also, I think yeah, I'm just excited. I'm excited for the future and for next year.
Yeah, I'm excited too. Like Kyle said, blackmarketnarrative.la. I'll put a link in the show notes.
Blackmarket.la.
Blackmarket.la. I'll put a link in the show notes, everybody. If you're having trouble finding it, just go there. So, again, congrats on the film.
Thank you.
Can't wait to see it, and have a great show.
Awesome. Good to see you, man.
You too. This is Jace coming to you once again live from San Diego Comic-Con. Here with my buddy Brian Buccellato.
What's up, dude?
Dude, so good to see you.
Likewise.
This week, hope you all got a chance to read the end of No One, or I should say the final issue for now of No One, issue 10. We were talking yesterday, and I want to get this, on camera for the fans, for the readers. It didn't end tied up in a nice, neat bow. Talk about the reason you guys chose to do that.
Well, I mean, it depends what your version of a bow is, right? Like, I know for a lot of people, they wanted to know who No One is, and you want to get, what's the answer? But sort of the point of the story is, life doesn't always give you answers. And, conspiracies almost never get answers. And even if they do get an answer, some people don't believe it.
Right.
Even when you're told directly what the thing is, there's a certain segment that will never buy.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was kind of our statement. And so, not to say that the whole book was like one statement piece, but that's a big element in our story.
But there is more to come.
Oh, yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. Exciting announcement. You guys are going to be doing a No One feature film.
Correct. Yes.
So, talk about when you found out that was going to happen. I'm sure it had been in works for a while, but once you knew for sure, contract signed or whatever, what was that like? Surreal or?
I mean, look, anytime you get to do anything creative and there's like financing behind it, it's always like very humbling and, I mean, you're always like on cloud nine, right? It's like, I get to do a comic, I get to do a podcast, and now we get to do this film. So it's always like, it's an amazing, amazing feeling, and now we just have to deliver.
Well, based on the success of the comic and the podcast and the quality, and knowing you and Kyle, you guys are going to knock it out of the park. I'm sure the next thing people are going to want to know, well, when's it coming out? It's too early, right? I mean, you guys.
Yeah, we're in the script phase. You know what I mean? Like we're working on it. We're working hard. I think we're as excited to know when it's going to come out as everybody else. But, I'm hoping next year. Yeah, there you go. Next year. All right.
Well, in terms of building on the story, again, it's like, I don't necessarily want more because I think it should tie up in a nice neat bow, because I agree with you. That's one of the great things about it. It's maybe the most real comic I've ever read. I just want more because it's such a great story. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I mean, in the feature film, are we going to expand more? Are we going to get a second volume in comics?
Well, I mean, the film is not just a retelling of the events of the comic and podcast. Like, we're taking the story a step further, and, there is the opportunity there to maybe get some answers that weren't in the other two, formats or whatever you call it. Yeah. As far as series, like, we're concentrating on the movie. Like, this has been a huge, huge lift with a lot of, it's very labor intensive. Like, there's a big mystery. There's a lot of characters. There's so much going on that I don't even want to think about a series until after we get through the next hurdle. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Well, I'm sure another thing a lot of people are wondering is, like, casting, right? Like, Patton and Rachel did such a fantastic job.
Yeah.
I mean, Yuri, Todd Stashwick, I just had him on.
Mm-hmm.
He's amazing as Ben Kern. Are we hoping to have some of those names?
We're definitely hoping. I can't give any information because honestly I don't know how it's going to play out, because they're all very successful people who have their own things going on. But we would love to have I think as many of those people. We want the continuity for one, and two, like they embody the characters in such a way that like it's hard to think of somebody else in those roles.
The thing I love about it is this is a series that I recommend to everybody, even people that aren't comic readers, because of the multimedia, because of the podcast. I think it just adds so much, and not just in terms of fleshing out and getting to hear the voices and feel that emotion, but it's additive, right? Yes. Like you read the issue, then you listen to the podcast. The podcast is maybe the next step talking about issue. Is that something you guys would like to explore with a different kind of story, with Kyle or on your own?
I mean, I think ultimately the answer would be yes. Hard to see it while we're so in it.
In this, right?
You know what I mean? But I think it was incredibly rewarding, satisfying, and would I be up to do something similar like that again? Absolutely.
Yeah. So is it fair to say this is the most fun you've had on a project?
It's the most fun I've had in a creator-owned project, 100%.
But also the most work.
It was the most labor intensive planning work. Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Well, great catching up with you, Brian.
Yeah.
Have a great rest of your con.
As always, pal.
Yeah.
Yep.
Jace coming to you from Comic-Con here with Melissa Flores live in person for the first time, which is amazing. But let's think back to the first time we had you on, that first issue. You talked about Bibi dealing with her trauma, honoring your partner, very personal story. Now that you look back, now that the series is over, her story's not done, but this initial first two volumes is done. Do you feel like you got there? You get to the finish line in terms of what you wanted to explore for her? And
absolutely, because I've always said at the very end, if we can get 12 issues out of the story, I feel like that would be a good start for Bibi, and I think that'd be a great way to close out the run. And I'd love to see her come back. We definitely have plans for her in the future, but I think this whole story of the Dead Lucky was her journey towards healing and accepting help, and I think we got there. And so for me, that was a satisfying ending we got. She found love, she found peace. The thing with PTSD is it's never going to go away. Those scars are never going to heal. So that's something that's going to be a lifelong journey for her. But for her to accept the fact that she needed the help and that maybe doing what she was doing was not the way was that step. And in the end, she did get to protect San Francisco. She did drive Morrow out of the city. And now she's just working on herself and working on basically another euphemism, right? Rebuilding the city is also rebuilding herself.
Right.
So it's a great start for her to go on future adventures and maybe be a little I miss the action and maybe go back on more adventures. You never know. So.
Yeah, that's what's so interesting because, you're right. She did drive Morrow out of the city and it felt, and I have San Francisco roots, so it was awesome to see. But now that she's in a better place and it's like, okay, mission accomplished here because she is so mission oriented with her military background. Now it's almost like it opens up the whole world. We'll see her other places when she comes back.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say a cool thing, but the really interesting thing about veterans with PTSD when they come back is that, you have that adrenaline rush and that certain heightened sense of survival that you live in when you're in combat constantly, and then when you come back and it's not there, suddenly feels like nothing else matters. And everything else just feels very mundane, and I deal with that with my partner a lot, where she's a very accomplished woman, but she feels like nothing she does matters anymore, because when you're not literally saving lives and you're just going to the store or doing coding on a website, how does that compare?
Right.
And so I think that's going to be the next journey for Bibi, is to figure out okay, is what I am doing at all comparable to fighting robots and things that my best friend died over. And so you're going to see that affect her relationships a little bit more. She's starting this new relationship with Maria. She's helping Georgia heal, but she's also got that itchy brain being I don't feel like I'm doing it. So it was one of those things that allowed her to run off in Supermassive and help, but I don't know how necessarily that good is for her and her relationships at home. So we're going to see a lot of that conflict still.
Yeah, and like you said, I think with her PTSD, that's something I'm sure a lot of veterans struggle with, finding that balance that, yes, it's okay to just, like you said, go to the store. Hey, I bought groceries today. That's a thing.
Yeah.
I get it. You're not saving lives, but...
Yeah, it's valid. It's your life has meaning, and it doesn't matter. You don't have to be saving somebody's life every day for you to feel like your life matters. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned her in the Supermassive crossover. You guys do one every year. I mean, I know you're always bouncing story ideas and talking with Kyle about the cohesiveness of the universe. But when you get to come together that one time a year to actually make a book together, what's that experience like? Is it just you guys just have so much fun?
Yeah, the great thing about it is that we're all friends first. And Kyle is such a good guy, in terms of he's so open to the creative process, and and I think that especially took the lead on this one, because we're all just running around our own projects, and so it was a matter of what's going on in the universe, what can work for all of us. So even as I was shaping the end of the Dead Lucky, I was shaping it to a point where she could go into this new adventure, and we've just all made sure that every little dot was connected, so that you did see little moments with Bibi and Shift, and you did see little callbacks to her personal experiences that rewarded the people that are reading the Dead Lucky, but hopefully don't make other people lost when you read the book itself.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, have a great con, Melissa. Thanks so much for catching up with us.
Thank you. It was good to see you.
Yeah, you too. All right, this is Jace coming to you once again live from San Diego Comic-Con. My buddy, Ryan Parrott.
Good to see you.
Good to see you, man. We're going to talk a little Massiverse. We're going to talk a little Rogue Knight. When we very first had you come on, and then again when we talked about issue 4, the big reveal,
right?
That it was Dylan's mom. that was when it became clear to everybody, I think, that this was a family drama. It was a personal story. Now you're 4 volumes in, looking back on the journey. You feel like you've been telling the story you want to tell. It's still personal. How's the reader reaction been? Give us the broad view, if you will, of the perspective of looking back on the series as a whole.
Yeah, I think it's been exactly what I wanted it to be, and it's like I've sort of taken my hands off the wheel a little bit and sort of let the story sort of guide me and tell me what I want it to be. Like you said, the first arc was a giant metaphor for divorce. A kid stuck in the middle of 2 parents who both want them to choose him, and he ultimately chooses his own path. What I liked about that was when I did that, the next step turned into sort of like, okay, when you don't pick one and you sort of pick your own way, like it's who are the people who influence you. So the next arc ended up being about step parents and how some of them can be helpful in your life and some of them can be sort of destructive. And then the third arc after that was sort of like dealing with step siblings. And so it really ended up being sort of a deconstruction of family at just every level. As like, for instance, like my parents divorced when I was a kid, and they both remarried, and they both had step kids. So my family got larger as I got older. So and my dynamic changed inside of that because I went from being the oldest in one to the youngest in another. And I thought that would be kind of fun to play with all of that inside of the superhero metaphor. So I've really enjoyed that, and it's fun. I've had people and fans come up to me who've really seen that and appreciated that. There was one fan that met me, I think it was in Cincinnati, who was telling me that he had a story about his father who did leave when he was a kid and then did come back into his life at the same time, and it was very similar to the stuff that happened to Roseanne. So it's always nice when you feel like the material that you're writing connects with people like that.
The other aspect of it that I continue to love, and we talked about this again right from the beginning, was this idea of Dylan's going to be a superhero, but he's just a dick.
He is a dick.
That's just who he is, and maybe he'll grow out of it in his 30s.
I think he's getting better. He's getting better.
Yeah. And I think he learned a lot when him and Caleb swapped.
Yes.
He kind of was seen through somebody else's eyes, and that gave him a different perspective. But that's another aspect that has to be fun too, because it's Peter Parker or Spider-Man, but if he was just a jackass.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Somebody said that it was like I was like, most comic book stories are about kids who get shoved into lockers and get superpowers. Yeah. My story is about the guy who's shoving the kids into lockers.
Yeah.
Literally in the first issue. Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. And it's so interesting because you get to play with that in terms of the larger massive universe. You guys have the one shot that just dropped. You do the big massive verse, super massive crossover once a year. This is the first time that it's Dylan interacting with
everybody
else.
Yeah. It's our third iteration. It's the first time the main character. I don't think Dylan has actually met Nathan, the Rogue Sun, Radiant Black yet.
Right.
We still haven't. The two main guys haven't even met yet. Someday we'll get there. But yeah, I think that's the fun part about doing those crossovers is that you get to sort of with the status quo changing every volume. If you do it right, the status quo should probably change a little. And so it's been fun to get to the end of those years and go, okay, where's my character? How are they? What's interesting about them? And then what's going on with the other characters? And how does that make those interactions fun? Because I feel like that's I've said this before, and I've said it. The thing is plot's an excuse for character, and so the plots should be if the characters are the same every time, I don't know why we're doing Supermassive.
Right.
So it's the fun part about each one of those is that every single version is very, very different. If you look at Rogue Sun in 2023 Supermassive, that's Caleb. He's a very stoic, sort of very strong-willed kind of character. And then you pick up 2024, he's more like Spider-Man. He's running around, he's talking trash, he's having fun, which is a lot more fun to write personally. So I like that. I like that each one of those crossovers hopefully feels like a different voice and has a different energy to them.
So can you tease where Rogue Sun goes? What's next for Dylan?
Yes. So right now we're in the middle of arc 4? Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, sometimes I lose track. So now that he's back out of the Sunstone, he's got his dad back. The idea that I liked is he wanted to be a little more. He's trying to be more assertive. He's trying not to wait back from Morningstar and keep sending more bad guys. He's tired of being a punching bag. But he doesn't really understand the world. He doesn't understand all the different players. So this next arc is about bringing in some new guest stars, some new people in the team that can hopefully give him a better perspective on the world and where he ranks in sort of the pecking order. One of them is a character named Divinity, who's actually Dottie's niece. And she's sort of this sort of fast-talking, doesn't suffer fool sort of bounty hunter who's going to try to let him know that hey, I know you think you're a big deal in New Orleans, but there's a much bigger world and there's a much bigger pecking order, and if you upset the balance, there could be consequences for that. And so we've got that. We're bringing in some new villains. There's a character named Mad Melody, who is a former singer who sort of sold her soul to Morningstar, which is kind of fun, playing in the New Orleans music scene. And there's a character named Vane, who's this sort of spelled V-A-I-N, or no, it's a V? Yeah, it's V-A-I-N, yeah. Who's sort of this weird sort of high he's sort of a highfalutin, what do you call it, a cult leader but who gives his power to his members, and sort of like he calls candles, and those guys are kind of designed to show you that there's other villains in the area, and if you go and take on Morningstar and you do take that, nature abhors a vacuum, how is that going to change the entire dynamic? So it's really about taking if the first 4 volumes have been about sort of establishing the hero and getting him to a place to where he can be his own man, it's now having the world sort of react to that and sort of like, okay, there's a bigger universe and a bigger world than just New Orleans and this one sort of villain.
I can't wait. It's like building a rogues gallery like Spider-Man has.
That's been the goal, man. I have a lot of villains. It's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Well, great to catch up, Ryan.
Likewise, man.
Thanks.